Shit. Huples Cat, welcome to Lecture 7, the first half, on what to do to survive anything when the Earth shakes. This lecture will be entirely devoted to earthquakes, and the lecture I'm really excited about is the back half of this, where we talk about volcanism, volcanoes, and karst topography, K-A-R-S-T, topography, otherwise known to people who live around North America as sinkholes, or cenotes if you're actually in South America, I think.
Do you remember where you were at 8:19 in the morning on Wednesday, September 26th, 1990?
Not really. I'd been in Canada about a year at that point. Why?
I was in high school, first period English, and the talk of the school was that we were going to have our first ever earthquake drill that day. I lived in an earthquake-prone area called the New Madrid Seismic Zone. Many people knew the area had a history of earthquakes, but there hadn't been a lot of attention given to it in the past. But in 1990, the school decided that it was going to have an earthquake drill, which was a kind of combination of duck and cover left over from the Cold War era, followed by evacuating the building like a fire drill. At 8:19 on the day of the scheduled earthquake drill, we had a real earthquake, 4.6 on the Richter scale, which was certainly enough to feel, even if not to do a lot of damage. I remember that for a moment, we were all really impressed with the authenticity that the school brought to the exercise.
I can imagine.
Let's talk a little more about earthquakes and the New Madrid Seismic Zone. To do that, I want to take a step backwards to the scientific concept of plate tectonics.
I haven't included quite a long and detailed primer on geophysics, on plate tectonics, but I'll give it to you in a nutshell. The Earth's a globe, and large parts of the interior of the globe are liquid and hot, very, very hot. And we live on a cold, solid piece on the outside. Us, humans, and even the fishes in the oceans, because generally speaking, the entire surface of the globe, mostly, is solid. Unfortunately, it's not completely solid, so there are breaks in the solidity of the outer shell of the Earth. So much like a chicken egg, they will actually move and slide if pressure is put on them from outside or underneath. Some of the edges are continually sinking underneath other edges, and some edges are doing this, and some edges are doing this, and some edges are doing this. Quite complicated, not really important. What's important is all of it leads to earthquakes. What is vital to understand is it generally happens very, very slowly, incrementally. For example, I think I used the example in one of the lectures that the United States of America Empire State Building and also the Statue of Liberty have moved about 100 meters from their actual position over the last couple of centuries, but it's so slow and everything else is moving you don't notice. Earthquakes are different because it's sudden movement. It can be sudden small movements or sudden long movements. You know, this can be a movement of 60 yards from where something was in a matter of minutes. So that's quite disturbing to anything on the outer shell. Of course, plate tectonics like gravity and human-caused climate change is merely a theory. As a theory, some of you may wish to ignore the possibility of earthquakes, but wherever you live on the globe, you really have to worry about earthquakes, even if you don't live near a fault line.
Why am I talking about the geological structure of the Earth?
By the way, the Earth is not flat, it's a globe.
Because areas where plates come together are those that are most likely to produce some of the most dramatic natural effects on the planet: earthquakes and volcanoes. The Ring of Fire is a line drawn to represent the borders of the Pacific Plate, essentially surrounding the Pacific Ocean, along which there is tremendous earthquake and volcanic activity. I'm from Missouri, and the New Madrid Seismic Zone is an area in southeast Missouri, northeast Arkansas, northwestern Tennessee, southeast Kentucky, and southern Illinois. It's named for the small town of New Madrid, Missouri. That's not at the boundary of any plates, but is squarely in the middle of the United States. Yet, in 1811 and 1812, it was responsible for some of the largest earthquakes on the North American continent.
I don't know about you, but the Midwest of America is not somewhere I typically think about earthquakes. I usually think about LA, San Francisco, the West Coast, part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. But the truth is, almost anywhere on the planet can experience earthquakes. In fact, that's not true. Everywhere can experience earthquakes. If you're actually where the plates meet, you're likely to experience many more earthquakes than people who are in the middle of the plate, but you're also likely to experience stronger ones. However, that's not always true.
Of course, this was before modern scientific measurements, but accounts at the time have led scientists to conclude that there were multiple major earthquakes that occurred over a several-month period. Each had a strength somewhere in the 7s or 8s on the Richter scale. That's in the same range as some estimates of the 1906 San Francisco earthquake.
On the 18th of April 1906, which actually is not that long ago in human history, San Francisco experienced an extreme earthquake and a resulting fire from the earthquake that basically totaled the city. Now, they rebuilt the city over a period of years. If it experiences an earthquake, most of the city will become uninhabitable for a period of months to years to decades. 500 city blocks were destroyed by the earthquake and the resulting terrible fire. The fires mostly and the earthquakes killed about 3,000 people. But what's interesting to me is that the population was about 400,000 at that time. It's a lot more now. And half of that population became homeless. Now, this is without modern building inspectors that would have labelled the homes that they felt were safe, unsafe. So obviously a catastrophic large earthquake near a major urban population centre is going to result in a heck of a lot of homeless people in the hundreds to possibly millions of people range. And that's going to be a very, very difficult thing to live through if you're directly affected, but also if you're not directly affected.
Even though the area was not highly populated, the effects were devastating. Waterfalls developed on the Mississippi River, and some parts were reported to flow backwards for a while. The earth lurched and fissures opened. Landscapes were altered. Sand boils ejected sand from beneath the ground, remnants of which can still be seen in the area. Some parts of the ground turned to a quicksand consistency in what's known as liquefaction. Residents of the area were offered up to 640 acres of land for free from the federal government so they could settle elsewhere in compensation for their damaged property. Some instances of fraud resulted, and the U.S. Attorney General had to become involved in the matter. In 2009, the Mid-America Earthquake Center at the University of Illinois in Urbana and Virginia Tech, located in Blacksburg, Virginia, produced a report on possible impacts of a recurrence of those 1811 and 1812 earthquakes. If it were to happen today, the area is much more heavily populated. Estimates are staggering. 715,000 buildings and 3,500 bridges, multiple interstates, railroads, airports, and hospitals, all damaged, some significantly, some destroyed. Over 2 million homes without power and 1 million without water. Over 7 million persons left temporarily without a safe home and 86,000 injured. These would be some impacts of a contemporary New Madrid earthquake with billions upon billions of dollars in damages. It's a good thing we started focusing on earthquake safety back in the 1990s to think about the impacts.
Yes, this is a good thing. Slight mitigation is better than no mitigation, but I still say if you live in an area where you can experience frequent large earthquakes on a regular basis, you probably should relocate.
This is all pretty devastating and a clear call that we need to be prepared. But as I said, it's not all fully understood. Scientists believe they have identified a failed rift zone that's causing all of this earthquake trouble in Middle America. That is, it's a geological weak spot that tried but failed to grow the North American plate. The scientific consensus is that it might happen again, or that it might not. Some scientists believe that the fault is aging out, less likely now to produce such dramatic future earthquakes, while others believe that the current earthquakes that happen there are still the aftershocks of 1811 and 1812. There are 3 points that I want you to take away from all of this. The first is that earthquakes can happen many places. You may be living somewhere right now that could be prone to an earthquake. The second is that we can't predict them. With earthquakes, after years and years of work, the most advanced warning systems can provide notice in the range of minutes and seconds, but not much beyond that. And even that is not a fully developed science. And the third is that earthquakes can be devastating and we need to be prepared for them.
Okay, I'll bite. How do we prepare for these?
A lot of it is what we've previously discussed. Have a go kit, have a family communication and meeting plan, know your local geography. We could add to that keeping a supply of food and water, and be sure to rotate the water supply periodically as it can go bad. It's likely that you won't have power or immediate access to stores if the earthquake is strong enough. What do you think the most likely cause of injury is in an earthquake?
My guess is broken bones and broken heads from falling stuff.
It's falling objects. That can include furniture that topples, items that can fly across a room, broken glass, building components like ceiling tiles, really anything that can be tossed by the earthquake's waves and fall down.
For me, the message should have been sent here quite loudly. Don't hang mirrors, don't hang pictures, don't hang shelves above beds and sofas if you live in an earthquake zone. It's okay putting reinforcement struts on, but anything on a shelf is going to fall out. The glass could shatter and break even if the mirror is secured. Don't have anything above your bed in an earthquake zone that can fall onto the bed.
If you live in an earthquake-prone area, one key preparedness measure is to make sure that heavy furniture is affixed to the wall, which can be done with straps or braces. The same goes for heavy light fixtures or shelving. Likewise for hot water heaters or appliances that are powered by natural gas. Another hazard that accompanies earthquakes is fire. As natural gas lines are disrupted and power lines are downed, fires can start, and it may take a while for fire departments to respond. They're going to be very busy, and roadways may be too damaged for fire apparatus to navigate. Learn where your natural gas shutoff valve is located and how to operate it. The utility company can help in providing that information. Many jurisdictions that are at risk for earthquakes now require construction to meet certain seismic standards to provide extra protection. It is possible to retrofit older buildings as well, although the expense for that can be fairly high. However, the more mitigations that can be made before a disaster occurs, the better, such as specifying earthquake-resistant building codes that can help reduce the likelihood of injury and damage.
In parts of the world where there are effective building codes for earthquake readiness, they tend not to be retroactively applied to old buildings because of cost and difficulty. So older buildings will not be safe, generally speaking, although if it's frequent earthquakes and the building's still standing, an older building might be a safer bet to hide inside than an external new building. But I think one of the major learnings for me when I studied earthquakes, and I didn't do it via this course, is that most building codes, where they are effective, are only designed for one thing. They're designed to allow people to safely get out of the building in a major earthquake. The building itself isn't designed to be usable post-earthquake. This in fact reduces human loss of life, but increases cost and difficulty in the long term from having buildings you can't now use safely.
What about during an earthquake? You may hear a low rumbling sound as an earthquake begins. Furniture may begin to shake, and items in a building may begin to rattle. If it's a small earthquake, you might not even realize it's happened, instead thinking that a large truck must have driven by. But if it's a large enough earthquake, you will feel it, and it may be disorienting. You may find it difficult to move. The advice that's given for protection during an earthquake is drop, cover, and hold on. Let's talk about each step. First, drop. Get on your hands and knees. Otherwise, you may get knocked down, which can cause injury. Also, it may be easier for you to move on your hands and knees as the shaking continues. Second, cover. If there's a piece of furniture that you can use for shelter, do so. Get under it. Even if a building is significantly damaged, being under sturdy furniture can be protective. If there's nothing you can get under, or if you aren't physically able to drop and cover under something sturdy, cover yourself with your hands and arms, or use something like a pillow or sturdy book to protect your head and neck first, but also your chest and abdomen. Being close to an interior wall is usually safer than an exterior wall, but be careful around windows, as the glass may break. If you're in bed, use a pillow to protect your head. Third, hold on. Hold on to the furniture you're sheltered under, or hold on to protect your head and neck if you don't have a shelter. If you're outside, stay there, but try to move away from risks. Get away from buildings because exterior walls are the most vulnerable, especially if they're adorned with decorative features. Power lines, definitely get away. Gas lines, again, get away. It may be hard to know where all risks are located, but as a general rule, an open area without utilities and with no visible sinkholes is the best. That's a lot to think about, and depending on where you are, a perfect location just might not exist. But use your best judgment, and you can still follow the drop, cover, and hold on approach to protect your head, neck, chest, and abdomen as much as you can. If you're in a car, stop and stay in your car. Again, avoid visible hazards like overpasses, underpasses, or power lines, and try to pull to the curb if possible and if safe.
画面左から津波に流される数台の車が。今度は後ろからも津波が押し寄せる。車に津波が到達したわずか10秒後、室賀さんの車が徐々に前に押され始める。そして25秒後には車は完全に浮き上がり、制御を失い漂い始める。
For me, this means that if you're in a car, or a bus, or a train, and you experience an earthquake near a major river or near a coastline, one of the first things you should do as soon as you can is to turn the vehicle around or get out of the vehicle and get away from the low levels of area that are near the rivers and near the coastline. This may interrupt your journey, this may take 3 or 4 hours out of your day, but if you make a habit of that every time there's a major trembler, and there's not that many, though they come in waves, but generally speaking, if I experience a major trembler today, like a major trembler, and I'm near a river system, or I'm near a dam, or I'm near the coast, I'm going to go, oh, there could be a tsunami, I'm getting out of here. And after 3 or 4 hours, I can go back. It's better to be safer than sorry. If you drive normally after the earthquake, you might encounter a tsunami. And one of the interesting things for me here is when you look at these videos, the people in the cars had about a minute, actually probably more like 44 seconds, to recognize the tsunami was hitting, to abandon their vehicle and run as quickly as they could to the nearest tall, strong building. Staying in the vehicle in this type of a scenario is a death sentence if you're entrapped by floodwaters from a tsunami.
If you continue driving, watch very carefully for damages and hazards. This not only includes roadways, but also locations where you stop. For instance, a gas station may be dangerous if gas is leaking and power lines are down. A business may be dangerous if there's shattered glass and parts of the building are unstable. If the damage to the area is significant enough, you may not want to continue driving on dangerously damaged roads or bridges. If a power line comes in contact with your car, stay inside until help arrives and the line is de-energized. This is a high-risk situation, but rescuers are trained to help. Now, let's talk about what not to do. Don't run outside during the actual earthquake. If you're inside, stay there. You may actually increase your risk of injury between the difficulty of moving without falling and the risk of falling objects inside the structure and the risk of items falling from the outside of the building. Now, there are some exceptions to this, such as if the building is made of unreinforced material, such as adobe, or if the building was built without engineering protocols. If you have questions about this, it's best to consult a licensed engineer. But with building codes in the United States, a total building failure is, while possible, not the most common outcome. You may have heard stand in a doorway. Unless the building is particularly weak, this is not good advice. In contemporary structures built to codes, the doorway isn't necessarily stronger than other areas, and if you're standing in the doorway, you are exposed to what is again the most significant danger in an earthquake: flying or falling objects. As with any other emergency response, practice. Have a home or workplace earthquake drill. Think about how you would drop, cover, and hold on.
I mean, there's a lot of basics here. I think one of the things you have to do if you're in a building and there's an earthquake hit, trust it won't fall. That's a simple thing. Don't trust it won't fall. Get under something that's going to be stable if it does fall. But one of the lessons for me is if you are in a building regularly, like a library studying, or you're in a university hall studying on a regular basis, or if you're at work on a regular basis, or if you're on transit on a regular basis in earthquake zones, you need to carry an EDC. And that EDC needs to have at least a litre of water. I would say 3 to 4 litres of water and some snacks in it and a couple of other things in it. Because if you are entrapped in the building but not killed, if you have even a litre of water which you can drink slowly and then urinate into while it's still liquid, not so much urine, you can actually extend your survival time by days. And if you're entrapped in a building, you're going to need days for people to get you out. If you have no water at all and you're trapped under a desk in a building, your survival time is not going to be very long. Water alone is a critical thing to have easily available to you in an earthquake. If it's in a cupboard over there, I might not be able to get to it.
Realistically, it would be impossible to practice every single contingency of where you might be when an earthquake occurs. But it's a good idea to give it some thought so the idea of drop, cover, and hold on becomes familiar.
Shit. So the earthquake's done. I've survived. The house has collapsed. This is my work bag, my go bag. It's under the table I'm at. It's over there, it's buried. I have water. This will extend my life by 2 to 4 days. I have a bunch of other stuff in here. It's a typical go bag. So I'm not going to go through it all because I'll blow the hell out of you. But one of the things for an earthquake zone is shoes. These should be under your bed. These are lightweight shoes. They have metal in the toe caps. This could come in very, very handy. I did this without shoes on because I might not be wearing shoes. Or I might be wearing high heels if I'm that inclined. I have another flask of water. That'll extend me. What else do I have in here? Warm clothing. What else do you have in here? Food. A big knife and a crowbar, which I'm not going to get out. So if you live in an earthquake zone, have a go bag that's designed to get you home, but also is designed to allow you to stay entrapped in a small space for 3 to 5 days, because you never know. It does happen, and you don't want to be in a position of being entrapped without any water or any supplies at all. Well, I survived. Anyway, the thing of it is, this all should sound very familiar to you. Duck and cover from the Cold War era to try and help you survive a nuclear thermal bomb going off over your head has been largely trashed, but is very useful from falling debris. One of the major killers, major damaging things in earthquakes is in fact falling debris. Most people who are entrapped in buildings are crushed to death quite early on, or run out of water and die quite early on. The few people that survive it because they're in a pocket that's been protected from the falling debris, and generally they have access to water of some description, even if it's gunk. So like I say, have a go bag underneath your desk if you live in an earthquake zone.
After an earthquake, first make sure that everyone is safe, including yourself, family and friends who are with you, and pets. And look for dangers. Remember that fires may occur. Be cautious and maintain a long distance from downed power lines. Electricity can flow toward you even if you're not touching the power lines, and distance is the best precaution. If you live near a body of water, and especially the ocean, the earthquake could trigger a tsunami, which we discussed in a prior lecture.
そして流され始めてからおよそ4分、車は吸い寄せられるように流れの速い水流に巻き込まれた。上下に大きく揺さぶられる車。 目の前では別の車が流れに揉まれていた。
This adds a second immediate crisis on top of the first, as getting to high ground is the essential response to a possible tsunami, which pushes devastating and dangerous levels of water and the debris it accumulates ashore. Buildings may or may not be safe to enter. Look for damage to the building. This could include disrupted utilities, visible damage to the structure, broken glass, damage to roofs or chimneys, hazards posed by damaged or overturned furniture or debris, and more. But as you do this, use caution. You may need protective equipment such as work boots or gloves. You may need to turn off power or gas. And if you have any questions about whether your home is safe to enter, contact local officials for assistance.
I think I should point out that in a major earthquake, in a major population centre, or even in a rural area, it could be days to weeks before you get any help whatsoever from outside.
If utilities are disrupted, only drink water that is safe, and never use stoves or any equipment that discharges carbon monoxide within an enclosed structure. Earthquake recovery can take considerable time, even measured in years. So let's be real. Preparedness may not prevent all damages and injuries, and recovery may still be a challenging endeavor. But carefully thinking through what might happen can help to save lives and property. Earthquakes come in different levels of severity. The Richter Scale is one way of scientifically measuring an earthquake's energy. It's a logarithmic scale. A one-step difference, say between a Richter 4 and a Richter 5 earthquake, represents about 32 times the amount of energy. A four-step difference, say between a Richter 4.6, which I experienced in my earthquake drill, and a Richter 8.6, which some suggest approximates the 1811 and 1812 New Madrid earthquakes, is 32 to the fourth power, or over 1 million times the energy. It's a staggering thought, really. The news media frequently report Richter scale levels, but that doesn't always tell us a lot. How bad is a 5.0 earthquake? 6.0? 7.0? In part, it depends on the geography of the area and the construction codes in terms of how far the earthquake is felt and how much damage it causes. An alternate measure is the modified Mercalli intensity scale. It measures the effects of the earthquake on a 12-point scale based on how much damage was actually observed in the aftermath of the earthquake. Earthquakes have levels. Volcanoes, on the other hand, are just plain dangerous.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this on earthquakes. Feel free to shove stuff in the comments. There's a whole bunch of stuff he doesn't mention, like having decent shoes and work gloves underneath your bed, because most of the time you're sleeping and an earthquake tends to hit while you're sleeping or at work or in transit. So have decent gloves and shoes and water and that sort of stuff available. Have a communications plan, have a get home plan. Have all of that things ready to go. But the major message from this is you can have earthquakes anywhere. You can have them here, you can have them in Toronto, you can have them in Ottawa, you can have them in the Midwest. It's not always going to be where the two plates meet. Sometimes it's going to be in the middle of the plate and a brand new unknown fault line breaks open, triggering a massive earthquake in the middle of the plate. Earthquakes are very, very high impact, very, very low risk, even if you live in LA, which is why we have big cities there. But my takeaway would be, if you live in LA or San Francisco or Seattle or Vancouver, and you know enough to know that you're on the Pacific Rim of Fire, and you have enough experience to know that a major quake hasn't happened for quite some time, and they happen all the time, that maybe this is the time to have a think about your lifestyle. Is this the time to sell your condo in San Francisco and move higher and inland? Maybe it is. Maybe it is for other reasons. Anyway, next week it's volcanoes. How exciting is that? We're going to talk about how to prep for, mitigate and survive a volcanic eruption. And of course I'm being kind of farcical, but he actually does devote part of the lecture to this. And he also denotes part of the lecture to Karp's topography. Karp's topography is in fact sinkholes forming. So you have on the surface, the solid surface of the earth, limestone's underneath, gets washed away by water, or sand gets blown out of it, and the top surface of the earth suddenly becomes no longer strong and stable and goes, and everything above it falls down. These are very, very high impact, very local phenomena. Volcanoes can be very, very local impact phenomena, they also can be very global in devastation. If the volcano is big enough and erupts long enough, it can trigger a winter in the summer that can go on for a year to 3 or 4. That would have an obvious impact on everywhere on the globe in terms of food supply, so it's important to look at volcanoes. Well, I'm hoping you're enjoying this series. I am, and stay tuned for next week. Let's erupt. Toodles.
Until next time, be safe.
This video was brought to you by an Earthquake Ready Dog production 2022.